Speaking of time and time in your hand, I can feel like each time, so to speak, you have a passion that there's something that really catches your eye and interest, from dance to skateboarding to directing to now coffee. What about the notion of time on its own? Like, how do you deal with time considering all the things that you have in your plate?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, as I've gotten older, I've realized that like time really is the most precious commodity. It's like everybody makes different money, everybody does different things with their time, but we all have the same amount. And it's really becoming paramount that I figure out how to just be efficient with my time and be precious with it in some sense, because this is this resource that is running out all at the same speed. You know what I mean? And so it's just become, yeah, it's always a juggling act, trying to do a lot of things, and it really is a balance in between.
And do it well?
Yeah, you're doing it well, yeah, because otherwise it's like I don't want to do it. If I'm not doing it at a high level, it's like I feel like it's a waste of time, you know? So, yeah, but as I get older too, it's like finding that right balance in between when you're really pushing hard and like working through everything, and then when you're kind of like sitting back and like just kind of not going crazy trying to do every single thing in the book.
And
right?
not traveling the world. Like yesterday I was calling you, we were having a burger inside the FP Journe boutique. Who does that?
I was having a burger inside FP Journe yesterday in LA, which was a fantastic evening.
Which is why you have the AP journal here sitting around your apartment alongside with like the AP book. So you really are into watches.
I am very much into watches, yes.
How did that started?
It's a tough question. So I remember, like, you know, growing up skateboarding, I remember going to the mall with my skateboard as like a 15-year-old kid, going to the Rolex boutique and looking at a Submariner being like, oh wow, that's really nice. And then like the salesperson being like, get out of here, you stupid kid with like a skateboard, you're not buying a Rolex right now, right? But I was always sort of like, I was always just enamored with it. I think too, like, you know, growing up, you understand quickly that for a man, it's like the number of like accessories or things you can do to an outfit is very limited, and like a watch is kind of like this interesting personal expression that you can have. And I don't know if it was like that or the mechanicalness of it all, or just like, you know, the whatever I thought the conception of like a man wearing a watch was growing up, but there was always a part of it that appealed to me. And even before I started I started collecting before I knew what collecting was. I was always like I grew up wearing like Ironman like daily. I remember when I was, maybe 10 years old, at the end of summer, I had like a watch tan and I was so proud of it. I was like, yeah, like this proves I like love my watch. I wear it all the time. And I was probably like 10 years old, you know? So there's always, you know, it's always kind of been in there. And then as I've grown up and, you know, just gotten more deep into things, you know, you start discovering different manufacturers, different things, different types, just the history of it all. I only deep dive into things. So obviously.
When was the first one you got?
The first, well, like watch or like nice watch or.
First watch you got your hands on, or that you actually paid with your own money and you were like the proud kid that could get out of the store with a watch on his wrist.
I don't know if this was, that's a good question. I don't know if I really remember, but I do remember one watch. Because when I moved to LA, I started getting into watches a little bit more, and I wanted an automatic watch. And I think I must have had like some kind of digital watch. Or maybe I didn't wear a watch when I first moved to LA. It was so long ago now, I barely remember. But I do remember doing research on automatic watches and being like, knowing at the time I couldn't afford like a Rolex or even like a nice luxury watch, but knowing that I wanted a mechanical watch. I looked on eBay and I found a automatic watch that had a Calvin Klein stamp on it. But I was so enamored with this watch. It had an open case back, you could see the movements, you know, and it gave me the month and the day, or the date.
Which is what you were looking for in the first place.
Yeah, and it was like on a leather strap. It was awesome. And I don't remember, it was like maybe a couple $100, $200-300. And I was so excited, and I wore that watch every day for like a few years probably. I feel like I have to have it somewhere, like it might be in my storage, but the day I find that watch again, I'm gonna
put it in a frame.
Yeah, put it in a frame, or I'll wear it, I'll get it serviced. I don't know, it's probably, I don't know what kind of movement is in there, probably, so who knows, but you know, I would love to see that watch again. I feel like I probably have it somewhere.
And now a couple of years later, you have kind of an eclectic collection of things from independent. I mean, we're gonna get into this, but then I want to hear all the stories behind everything, starting with the one that you have on the wrist, which is obviously the hip and trendy Tiffany dial
This is
that
a hip
everybody
and
has been talking about the last couple of months.
Yes, this is a hip and trendy watch.
But you did it before it was hip and trendy.
I did, yes. So when I started getting into watches, my mom would always tease me, like, when are you gonna buy me a watch? When are you gonna buy me a Rolex? Like teasing. And I always wanted to. It was always like, oh, that would be a really nice thing to do. And so when these came out, it was my mom's 70th birthday. And so I was kind of like, oh, if there's ever a time where I do it, it should be now, you know what I mean? So I was like, oh, I just kind of came to terms like, oh, like this is the time. And so I think I got them.
So you didn't get one, but two.
Two Tiffany dial Rolexes at retail. And I'm not gonna tell you who my guy is. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so when these first came out, I think the reception was a little not like crazy. It was like they're like, that's cool. I don't know. And my mom had seen one of the Tiffany ones. And she was like, ooh, Tiffany, and I like made a mental note. And so I hit up my guy and I told him the story, and I was like, look, it's my mom's 70th. I want to get matching things with me and her. I want to get them engraved. And their perspective was like, okay, the hard one, like they're gonna sell the 41, but the 31s were like not flying off the shelves at the time, you know what I mean? And so I was like, look, I want a 31 and a 41. And so he sold it to his boss. He's like, look, it's for him and his mom, it's a gift. And if you can sell through a momentous occasion, it's just like more of a reason to get one allocated,
Yeah.
I was telling the truth, so it wasn't like trying to lie to get watches. But it just
engraved at the back.
So mine says 1.2 billion seconds and counting, which is the number of seconds my mom was when she gave birth to me, when she had me.
That's cool.
Yeah. And then so hers has 1 billion seconds, which is how old I was when I gave us the watches. So, because I don't want to be like, happy 70th birthday. It's like, it's kind of lame. So.
Well, you said it earlier, you need to be creative.
Yeah, you need to be creative. So I wanted to do something a little bit more interesting. And so, yeah, and we wear them all the time. And it was her first Rolex. And
Are you not afraid to wear that one in LA?
I don't wear them out anywhere. They stay at the bank. I mean, so my rule is, look, you have to be cautious these days, and depending on like what I'm wearing, like some stuff is like more heaty, like this is a little bit more heaty than even like a coat is a little bit harder to tell what it is, though I still am like cautious to wear them out. It's just like if I go.
But it's not the regular AP that everybody has been like craving and wanting.
Yeah, I mean, you see a Royal Oak bracelet, it's like, that's really identifiable. So I think you just have to be really smart and like, just be aware of the situation. And I when I go out, I see people wearing stuff all the time and I'm like, oh man, I wouldn't wear a watch here, so I feel like I'm more on the trying to be as sort of cautious as I can. But, it's just a thing to be mindful for. I don't just go, I wear it too. Yeah, you're just careful. I'm just smart about it. I just don't do it frivolously. I have some other stuff that I wear that I really like that is just like, nobody would jack me for it. So it's fine. I wear those a little more often sometimes.
And actually, speaking of the code, like it's pretty rare to see somebody who's that into watches and actually enjoys a code 59, which I think this is an amazing watch.
Yeah, I don't know. So this watch is interesting. So I absolutely love this watch. This is the Code 1159 chronograph. Rose gold with ceramic mid case. So there's like the ceramic on the
makes it super light
middle,
as well.
Yeah, super light, and like a really cool vertical brush dial that's a little fumé. And so I was in the New York.
Smoked in English?
I don't say smoked. I say fumé. Say fumé.
Fumé.
Though I don't know what dial is in French.
Cadran.
Cadran?
Yeah.
Cadran fumé. So anyway, so I was in the AP boutique in New York and like just in for a visit, like I was in New York for whatever. And so I sat down with them just to like chat and like keep the relationship going or whatever. I wasn't like waiting for a piece or like trying to get something, but they had just released these. There's a white gold one and then a rose gold one. So she brought them out and I saw them. She also brought out like some divers and a bunch of other things. I was just like looking at stuff hanging out. And when she brought out this one in particular, I just like nothing else existed. I was like, oh, like this is like.
And what attracted your attention in the first place?
I don't know. It's just like, it's like sometimes you pick up a watch and it just sings to you and you're like, oh, this is it. And so what was interesting about that interaction was I became enamored with this watch and I didn't even request it. She just saw how much in love I was with this watch. And I think she just made a mental note. And so I like left because also like, you know, it just like wasn't in the place at the time to be like, okay, this is what I want to spend my money on. You know what I mean? It was just like, I love this watch. This is amazing. She noted it. And then that was it. We kind of just kept in touch. I never requested it. And maybe 6-8 months later, she calls me out of the blue. She's like, hey, I got a cancellation for the rose gold code 1159. Like, do you want it? And I was like, oh man. And so this was like maybe about a year ago now.
Okay.
And I was like in the middle of like thinking about buying a house. And I was kind of like, oh, what do I, yeah, I watch house. I was like, well, it's like not gonna help me buy a house if I get this watch. And so I said no. So I said, I was like, oh, like, thank you so much. I'm trying to buy a house. Like, I'm gonna have to pass. You know what I mean? So I hung up the phone and like immediately regretted it. Started talking to like my friends and even talking to my mom of like the reality of buying a house in LA, which is fine, but it's like not a fit. It's like the market is so overpriced. It's so crazy. And I started like really thinking about what I wanted to do. And maybe it was just the fact that I was getting offered a watch. Maybe it was really just coming to terms with like buying wasn't quite the right time. But I think I called her back the next morning. I was like, no, I'll take it. I'll take it. I want it. And she was like, oh, let me like make a call. Cause she like released it. So she gave it to another sales associate. They had like had a call out for it, but they hadn't heard back. And so she grabbed it back and she was able to sell it to me. And so it's like, you know, I slept on it for 12 hours. I almost lost it, but
it's good. You always say that you need a one night to actually think about things.
Yeah, exactly. I probably should have just asked for a night and been like, she would have held it for a day, right? But anyways, but I was just so, like, it was so cool because it wasn't that I was like, hey, I love this piece, I want it, get it for me. She showed it to me and she just saw the look on my face.
Yeah, it's something you can't lie about it.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Like a micro expression that you couldn't control.
Yeah. And so she just noted that and was like, okay, like I know, he's not asking for it, but I know, you know? And it just so happened that someone had a cancellation and she thought of me.
And it was meant to be.
So yeah, it was very serendipitous. So it was, and I absolutely love this watch. The codes are so amazing in person. I think like the top-down photos.
It's undervalued for some reason.
Yeah. But this is gonna stay in the collection for a long time. It's such an amazing piece and the movement they made in it is insane. Like flyback chronograph is so cool. Like it's super comfy, it's gorgeous. I love this watch. I've worn this on the red carpet a couple times.
Cool.
Yeah.
What's up with, well, I want to say, should we go on? Maybe, yeah, we'll go with the other Rolex, the one that's, according to you, all beaten up, but there's like half a scratch on it?
No, there's more than half a scratch on it. So this is a GMT Batman that I got in 2014. So this was my first Rolex that I got. I had been traveling a bunch with Pink still at that time and was like, oh, I should get a GMT if I'm traveling, you know? And so I just saved up my money and was just kind of like, I was like, oh, I want to get a Rolex.
But it's funny how in all the watch choices that you have, it's either driven through emotion or through an actual story. It's not just on impulse, like you have it, I take it.
Yeah, I try to, now I might just be prescribing meaning like after the fact to justify these purchases, but I like to have some kind of meaning. It's like, you know, I've collected for a while, but it's like, I'm not the type of guy that gets all the watches, all the references. A, it's like not financially feasible, but B, it's just like not how I collect. I know a couple of collectors like that and like great for them. But for me, it's always like there needs to be a bit of a story and it's almost like, I don't know, I like it more because it reminds me, like I wear this watch and it reminds me of all the time I've had it on the wrist, you know, and obviously now as my collection grows, it gets less wrist time, but when I put it on, it almost like just brings me back a little bit to like traveling for work. And
you always travel with a watch, even though you don't wear them in LA, you're very cautious about it. You always have a piece on you when you travel. Because it brings out memories, like whenever you travel, you're creating history.
Yes, but now, like, you know, like I went to Asia and I didn't bring this with me. Though I feel like Asia's pretty safe. But I mean, I wore a Tudor on my trip. I have a Black Bay bronze.
That's a cool one.
Which is really cool. And so I was like, oh, I'm moving.
Patina.
Yeah, I was like, I wore it in the Indian Ocean. I wore it in Thailand, you know what I mean? So I was like trying to get patina on it. But that one I felt a little bit more safe wearing. It's a shame that like the conversation, it has to incorporate that, like just the safety of it all. But I don't know, like you definitely.
Even in Paris, you can't wear a watch anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that you can't wear a watch, but people say you're still wearing your watch. Well, you can't wear the big four. There's the big five when you go on a safari, and now there's the big four, which is the four brands that are. But it's technically more 6 models, 6 references, 4 models. So it's like you're putting the thing into it, but now it's becoming more general.
Yeah.
And what's up with the Mad One, which is a very niche, specific
So
watch.
I just love, I love watchmaking. I love creativity. I love thinking out of the box. I just love just really creative individuals that are pursuing something different. And that's a part of the reason why I think Journe is so cool. What he's doing and the things that he's creating is just beyond me, you know what I mean? So
he's
that
a creative genius.
Oh, absolutely. If there's ever a watch genius in our era, it's undoubtedly him, you know what I mean? And so, still waiting for that piece to come in, but the idea of someone doing something creative is like Max is another person that's just doing the most ingenious things with watchmaking that is just so cool and on another level. But it's I can't afford an Evo Perpetual as much as I want one. I cannot afford one.
Which color would you pick?
I kind of want a legacy, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Oh man, a purple dial legacy.
I was gonna say purple is the thing.
Oh, so cool. I saw a collector I know has a green one, and it's also unbelievable, but the Perpetual is super cool. They just do so much cool stuff. Right, but so when
Back to the Mad One.
Back to the Mad One. So he announced the blue one for existing customers and then people that work with the brand, and that was super cool. And I just emailed them. I was because I think he maybe mentioned maybe we can make these one day, but these are just for collectors or previous.
The F of the MB&F.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. And I wasn't quite an F yet, but I think he kind of dropped a hint, was maybe we'll see if we can maybe make these one day. And so I emailed and I was look, hey, if you guys ever make one, I'm in. This is so cool. I love it. I think it's really cool what you're doing. So just count me in. And I just never thought of it, just emailed. And then, I don't even know, a year later, they come out with the red one, and then they're talking about the allocations and this and that. And at some point, he's if you guys emailed me about the first one, we'll get you one. I went straight back on the email. I was hey, I sent you one, here's the email. And so, I refreshed his memory. So he's okay, yeah, you're good. But then I used a little bit of leverage to get one quickly. So this is the top of this year. And I really I always wonder too, where you have people like John Mayer and Kevin Hart, do they just go to watch brands and be I'm Kevin Hart, give me a watch.
Give me a watch.
And I think that there is that and there isn't that. So I still think that bottom line, it's they're great collectors that have built the relationship through purchases, through being who they are, through doing all that stuff, but it isn't so simple. So I also I never am hey, I'm famous on Instagram, give me a watch.
All these celebrities on the red carpet.
Yeah, so I never use that as an angle in. I think that having some kind of social media fame, all it really does is people will answer my email, which is sometimes enough, but it's they just is the door's kind of open if you want to
push, but then you need to make the extra mile in order to get
I
there.
Still with everybody with Rolex and with AP and with everybody, it's I still am a regular client that has the regular interactions, and they don't treat me any different, and they say that, and they say they treat everybody the same, and it's I'm still in that system of how it works. But when I can try to provide leverage to, get something.
Dance?
I do what I can, right? So it's actually not that crazy, but so I got this allocated through the email, and I was look, you guys are delivering them soon. I was the Grammys is in 2 weeks. If there's one that is done, if you wanted to send it, I will guarantee you I'll wear that on the carpet. I'll be super excited. I'll be so happy. And they were super receptive. They're that's awesome. Because they were well, if you're gonna get one, what's the difference? So they sent me one super early. There was actually a bunch of customs issues because of the coding on the strap, and it got hung up in customs, and so we had to go back and forth. But I think it actually maybe smoothed out some of the workflow. But I got it like a day before the Grammys, and I wore this on the Grammys red carpet this year, and I was
That's cool.
so excited. It was like
Red
such
carpet with the red details.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, it was such a cool, and it's such a cool piece. It's so unique, and you get a little bit of the MB&F DNA in something that is quite affordable, albeit still quite hard to get, you know. But it's just this invention is so cool. So I hats off to Max for making this thing happen.
Now you need to plan a trip to have dinner with François Paul, meet with Max, and visit the Met Gallery.
I would love it. Like, it's really coming, as I get more and more into this watch obsession of mine, you know, going to Switzerland is obviously becoming high on the list. And so I think probably next spring.
You also learn how to make the perfect fondue after making the perfect coffee.
This is true. Yeah, so I think Switzerland trip is definitely in order.
Cool, and I'll help you definitely organize it. But in the meantime, like, what would be the next watch you'd be on the move for, on the lookout?
Oh, well, so like Journe, right? Like
Okay.
it was interesting. So, I mean, there's a couple things that I'm lusting after, but also I feel like I'm in the place, like, you know, for the past couple years, it was very much like you're become, not accumulation mode, but you're more like, oh, I want to get this, I want to get this, I want to get this. But as my collection has grown a little bit, I've definitely toned down on like any kind of lust for watches, because I'm very happy with like what my collection has. Like, I have a variety of pieces that I can wear for different occasions. So I'm not really trying to like fill a void, you know what I mean? As far as like I need a dress watch or a sports watch or whatever.
Of course.
So I'm very much like, you know, like I've been trying to get a Journe for about a year now, and it's...
Which one?
Well, I mean, elegant, of course.
Which
right?
color?
Tidalite, right? With an orange strap to start.
Just like that.
Yeah. But then the automatic has my heart. So that's like the Octa that they discontinued, I don't know, like 10 years ago. It's just the clean dial, the time, power reserve. It's very FP Journe style. And so like that's a watch I'm waiting for. And just very, I don't know, I'm just enamored with what Journe does, and like just the watch. So I was just like, you know, and so I'm not like, you know, I'm not like, oh, is it coming? Is it coming? Do I get it? It's like, look, they know I'm on the list. It's like, when it comes, it comes. It maybe, you know, next year, maybe late next year, like maybe the year, like who knows? And I'm not like, I am pining for it, but I can be patient at this point in my career of collecting watches.
But it's not like you need it to work or wake up in the morning, but you actually do enjoy it the way you could enjoy a classic car or get a new
and I think the wait, as annoying as it is, and as much as we all want these pieces right away, it's like when it comes, it makes the, like, getting the allocation
It's like the Holy Grail.
Yeah, it means more because you waited for a year and a half or 2 years. Like your interest in that piece sustained that long. Like that means something. And so when you get it, you're like, oh, it's finally here. Where if I was like, oh, I want an elegant, and they're like, oh, come tomorrow and get it. I'd be like, okay, like that was cool, like great. You know what I mean?
But I'll come the next day.
Yeah, right? So, you know, I just think that like it's all a part of it now. And I think that at this place, being really happy with like my collection, if a piece comes in a year or two, like that's fine. If I'm still into it, great. If I'm not, I'll pass. It's you know, it's at a very very pleasant stage in my collecting right now. Whereas earlier in my collecting journey, it was like, oh, I want to get this thing, and I want to get this Daytona, I want to get that.
No, but you're doing it in a very healthy way.
Sometimes. You don't see me 3 a.m. like Googling reference numbers.
What do you think of the Octo?
The Octo Fist one?
Yeah.
I think it's super cool. I really think it's really cool. I think it's a unique design that I think they brought it back. It was like an older design that they brought back. I think it's a little big for my wrist. I kind of have small wrists. It's like big and chunky, so I don't think it quite works for me.
You'd be surprised. If you've never tried it,
I think I tried one on, but I just think the designer's super cool. And I think that, I think they're really, really cool watches. But I should probably give it another try. I think I've tried one on, but maybe I should try it again. When
you'll come to Switzerland, we'll go and try one together.
Oh, great. Yeah, perfect. Then maybe I'll get an impulse buy. I mean, I've always loved them, but I just, I don't know if I've convinced myself that it doesn't work so well on my wrist, but maybe I need to give it another shot.
You'll see.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you so much for all of this great stories, great input.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you for the coffee.
You're very welcome.
Up and running for the rest of the night.
Yes, I love it. Your mind will be going. You can work right into the edit.
I'll be texting you. Oh, I've got a couple more questions. Can you tell me this? Can you tell me that?
I will hopefully be sleeping. But thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure talking about watches. It's been a delight. And hopefully, do it again sometime.
Next time in Geneva.
Yes, please.
Perfect.
Awesome.